Now, here's an issue I didn't think I'd have to be talking about in 2026: homophobia. That can't be an issue anymore. We're well past that, right? Well, evidently not. Whether it's from an overreaction to increasing trans visibility or the rise of the so called manosphere, homophobia is making a return, and in some of the dumbest possible ways. Before I delve into that, I want to add a bit of historical context. Not ancient history, but my own millennial history. When we were kids at school, we used to call everything gay. You're gay, that's gay, everything is gay. The thing is, it wasn't meant as a homophobic slur. It was our way of saying lame. You're lame, that's lame, everything is lame. It wasn't intended to be hateful towards gay people. However, in hindsight, we can recognize that the kids at school who were gay were hearing everyone else calling everything negative that they disliked gay. In that position, you would feel attacked, like you were hated and needed to hide who you were. The words we use matter. But that attitude towards disparaging homosexuality wasn't unique to us. It was the legacy of the attitudes of people that came before us. We can look back now at a TV show like Seinfeld as problematic by today's standards because it had a running gag of somebody proclaiming that they weren't gay, followed by, not that there's anything wrong with that. The thing is, though, society at the time was still relatively homophobic. What Seinfeld did was normalize that homosexuality was not a bad thing. It seems antiquated now because the culture adapted to that message. The world developed much slower before the digital era, and much of the world is still made up of analog era people. Some of the homophobia of today is still from the old misunderstanding of homosexuality, the belief that it is a choice, that people choose to be gay. That is not true. Now, we don't know how it works exactly. We don't know if it's genetic or if it's something in our brains. We don't have that answer yet. But what we do know is that it's not a choice. Whether you're gay, straight, bi, or asexual, you are or you're not. It's not a choice. You can explore your sexuality to figure out where you sit on that spectrum, but you can't change it. A lot of the most vehemently homophobic people tend to be closeted homosexuals. They believe that it is a choice, that everyone else has the same homosexual desires that they do, that people either don't act on it and behave straight, or they give into it and be openly gay. But that's not how it works. It's another instance of people believing that everyone else thinks the same way they do. The reason they can't accept that it's not a choice and just be themselves is typically because their community, political, religious, or otherwise, doesn't accept it. If their community hates gays, then they will play their part as one of the most vicious homophobes amongst them, rather than risk social exclusion. Part of the issue for them, I believe, is the increase in visibility of trans people. They'll invoke the slippery slope argument: first you accepted gays, and now they're trying to make all the kids trans. It's bullshit, but if you're an ignorant fuckwit, then it might make sense to you. What makes it worse is that there will be young, ignorant people who will claim that gender and sexuality are a choice, because that's wrong too. You are not helping. Exploration is a choice, but the outcome is predetermined. Gay people have fought for their rights for decades, centuries perhaps, to be accepted for who they are because it's not a choice. You throw them and all of their struggles under the bus when young people say shit like that. While I'm on the topic of trans people, the percentage of people identifying as trans seems to be unusually high, particularly within Gen Z. Now, I understand the argument about the suppression of left handedness, that we are just in the process of finding the natural level, but I still think that doesn't fully explain it. I think there's an element of social contagion, that it has been normalized so much that more people are exploring their gender identity than there normally would be. I also think that there's an element of misidentified homosexuality. That for some people, it's easier to accept being a straight woman trapped in a man's body than just being an effeminate gay man, possibly because of the increase in homophobia coupled with the growing acceptance of transness. With that said, one of the biggest sources of homophobia comes from the manosphere, the social media environment where mostly young, insecure men teach younger, pubescent boys how to be masculine. But what they teach is fragile, insecure masculinity. They popularize the old fashioned toxic elements of masculinity, that of violence, aggression, and domination. The things that pubescent minds that are surging with testosterone that they can't control will find appealing, which leads them to being angry and hateful. They treat women and girls as lesser than they are and put gay people on that same level because they're seen as feminine. They may compliment a fellow bro but then throw in a no homo as a qualifier, which, whether they mean to or not, implies that being gay is a bad thing. This has consequences. There are young men who don't wash themselves properly because they think touching their own ass is gay. It's fucking stupid. If touching your own dick isn't gay, then touching your own ass isn't either. But that's the dumb shit they learn from nutsacks like Andrew Tate and little Nicky Fuentes. The alternative to this is that boys learn to suppress their emotions. They don't give in to anger, but they don't learn how to process things like sadness either. They become hollow, stoic, and emotionless. Nobody teaches us this. We learn it ourselves to survive, to control ourselves and stop being hurt and hurting the people around us. It would be great if boys had masculine role models that could teach them how to manage their emotions the same way that girls are. But how do we teach something that we were never taught, that we never learned? That's why the manosphere shit is so much easier to teach. We have plenty of examples of that set by men who were here before us. It's the ones who choose to be different, who try to avoid the mistakes of the past as best they can, who become better men. We need more of them as role models if we ever want to stop this cycle.